Welcome to Bears on Tap, hosted by Kyle Juice Michalski, Quinten Q Krzysko, Sonny Verma, and the one and only Ron Luce. Bringing you all the news, analysis, and opinions on the charter franchise, Chicago Bears.
And we are back. We are here to preview the Bears game with the Packers. But before we get into all that, there's been some changes at Hallis Hall, and we need to talk through some of those. But my name is Quinten Krzysko. I'm joined by Ron Luce. We are Bears on Tap. Ron, how are you doing this fine evening?
Q, I unfortunately was not able to join you and Sonny on Sunday. But I was at Soldier Field on Sunday. I was in the stands. Got to hear.
A bunch of people were like you. Yeah. Robert Schmitz was there. Brennan Shagru, Mason West, like a bunch of Bears content people were out there for this one.
It's like everybody knew. Everybody just knew that something either really good or really bad was going to happen, and people were trying to kind of settle in for it. We got some fire Eberflus chants.
Mm-hmm.
We got plenty of boos, and I will hand up. I participated in said boos. It was a hell of a thing, man. But you know what? Like you said, we got some news to talk about. And I think this is gonna change, hopefully, a lot of people's philosophy about the Bears for the rest of the season. Obviously, that completely depends on results of the team now as a result of said changes. But can't wait to talk about it with you, man. How are you feeling?
You know, I'm feeling better than I was Sunday. Like I'm still not happy about anything with the Bears right now, but I think I've just come to terms with some of it. I think some of it is just I've kind of accepted a little bit of it and found like, you know, maybe there's a light out of the tunnel here at some point, and kind of reasoned with myself some. But let's get into it. So the Bears, they, in my opinion, lost to the third straight team where they are better on paper than that team, which means they just got horribly outcoached for the third straight week. And embarrassing fashion, only scoring 3 points at home as a team that prides itself for winning at home. That's a bad sign. And giving up 19 to a Patriots offense, sure, they had Drake May, but that offensive line was worse off than the Bears offensive line is right now. And I think that's something that needs to be capitalized for everybody. They were starting 5 backups. The Bears were starting 3.5 backups, if you consider Matt Pryor or Ryan Bates a starter. Like
fair.
That they're worse off in their O-line than the Bears are right now. And just to give you some perspective, and we'll talk about more on the O-line show about why I always say other teams are figuring it out. You know, like I think they're the perfect example of that, where they're not good, but they figure it out better than the Bears have. But you have that awful showing. The next day, we get Matt Eberflus going on. It was ESPN 1000 on Cap and Jay Hood talking and going through a tunnel or something. His phone cuts out after Kaplan asks him. I forget what exactly it was he asked him. It
something
was like,
pretty important, I believe, too. Like it was a pretty hardcore question. Yeah.
It was, he was going at him, and his phone goes out and he never calls back. And then we get Jalen Johnson later in the same day going on the score. And I want to put these quotes out there because I think these matter. So you had Matt Spiegel asking him about, are there some players who work harder than others? And it's kind of a cheap question, right? Like of course there are some players who work harder than others. And he says that in his question. He's like, it's kind of human nature. And so John says, yeah, I don't even think that's a real question. But then he goes on to describe like what he can do, if there's anything he can do to help improve that. And he's saying, you know, at a certain point, this is the quote, at a certain point, you just think in your head, maybe that guy doesn't give a damn like I give a damn. At the end of the day, that's okay. But you can't necessarily change somebody's want to or hunger to do something or be uncomfortable. And then he continued, oftentimes there's something better to do. Then we say we all want to win. And by something better to do, he was saying like there's excuses. No, we all don't want to win at the same level. There is not the same level of application. You can take a horse to the well, but you can't make him drink. We need to have a lot of guys that are thirsty. And it feels like that's an area to improve for everybody, players and coaches. Like that from your second team all-pro cornerback and defensive captain, that says those words were very loud to me.
Oh yeah, those carry a lot of weight, and they should, right? Like you said, he's a leader on this Bears team. There's no dodging around that. Like that is his role on this team, is to be one of the faces, one of the leaders, one of the franchise pillars of the Chicago Bears. And Q, I think you nailed it spot on too with the nature of, right. Like, yeah, of course, guys work harder than others, but this is where coaching comes into play, because you look at a team, and I don't know if you saw the clip, or anybody that's listening to the show saw the clip, but it was the post game from the Lions locker room with Dan Campbell. That is a culture where even if you got certain guys that do work harder than others, that gets masked because you're winning ball games. Winning cures everything. That's just the nature of the beast. Winning will always cure everything. But that's a team that's rallied around a common goal, a common mission. And like you said, right? Like Jalen was hinting, we need guys that are thirstier. They're all thirsty for wins. And you see it. And you see it in what they do on the field. And hell, that incredible second half comeback against the Texans, I think articulates that in a physical form. The Bears don't have that right now. Right? Like you can almost tell on the field. You saw Caleb Williams rolling his eyes at Shane Waldron, and you seen the body language of guys toward Eberflus. Like Eberflus can sit there and tell you that the locker room is in good shape and everybody's fine, and I still call a load of horseshit. There are 100% guys in that locker room that no longer buy into Eberflus, and maybe your leaders still buy into Eberflus, right? Maybe they're still dialed in, but there are absolutely guys that no longer give a damn. And you can just see it. You can see it on the field in the way they play. And Sunday was a perfect articulation of that. As you said, they gave up 19 points at home, where the Bears in the Eberflus era are always winners at home if they're going to win games. You can't allow a far inferior team to walk into your own building and do what they did to you on Sunday. And you're kind of seeing the recipe of a coaching staff that clearly doesn't have complete buy-in from the locker room, and guys who aren't working as hard. But again, because they're not winning, it's the difference of a whisper to somebody yelling through an air horn about how important that is right now to what they're doing in the locker room.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And then so just to keep flying through some of this, because like I said, we got a lot to touch on here. Same day, Matt Eberflus, this might have actually been before the Jalen Johnson comments, but he goes up to the podium, gives a whole bunch of nothing, basically, and then
Word
says,
salad.
We're going to figure something out in the next 48 hours, which was almost maddening because you're sitting there. It's Monday afternoon. You're saying 48 hours. So you're not going to have an answer to this till Wednesday, when your game plan should already be starting to be implemented. You won't even know who's going to be calling the plays or who's building the game plan. Like that was a red flag to me, right? When I heard, I was like, 48 hours? You don't have 48 hours, buddy. Like you are on the clock right now. You need to figure this out, which clearly someone got to him and said that, because this morning, Shane Waldron out the door. Shane Waldron no longer offensive coordinator. Thomas Brown, pass game coordinator, is taking over as offensive coordinator from here on out. Ron, what were your thoughts on the whole sequence of that?
Well, I'm happy they didn't wait till Wednesday to make this decision, right? When you're going to have practice and like installs have already happened, right? They made it, I think, timely. Tuesday is typically when installs and all of that begin. Yes, obviously, as coaches, you start game planning on Monday. Don't get me twisted. But like with players, the install begins on Tuesday. So you took care of business when you needed to. And I'm sure that was a hell of a meeting with the team this morning at Hallis Hall, letting everybody know that Waldron's gone and Thomas Brown's now your new OC. I like the decision of it being Brown over anybody else. I know there's other guys in that offensive staff that probably could have been, you could have made the argument for, but Thomas Brown's been an offensive coordinator in this game. He's highly respected. He's gotten head coaching interviews before this season. I think he's the right guy to take over. He was Frank Reich's OC in Carolina. Obviously Frank Reich, I think, got kind of a short end of the stick that wasn't totally fair because of Carolina ownership. So I think it's hard to grade his tenure as coach in Carolina. But they did some things with Thomas Brown as their OC. And, there was at times some promise. Obviously, a brutal roster limits that. in Carolina, but I think he's the right guy for the job. He's had his finger on the pulse of the offense the whole season, being the passing game coordinator. And to me, if there's going to be anybody that can take the current structure of the offense and either A, simplify it, or B, just call what they need to call in the certain scenarios, and understanding that you have a depleted offensive line and you might not be able to get the routes downfield that take 4 and 5 seconds to develop. To me, this is the opportunity now where if I'm Thomas Brown, I look around and I go, if I turn this ship around and the Bears somehow are even sniffing the playoffs at the end of the season and the offense recovers, he might be getting head coaching candidate, interviews this offseason if that happens. So he's got a big chip on his shoulder now too, to try and resurrect this thing. And hopefully they can go back to the run game and just find some success there. I know, Bear Truth 9 said it here in the comments a little bit earlier. He says, not where you sure you can go from here, but if you do start with Brown, you probably scale it back and hopefully establish and don't quit on the run game. And I agree with that. Especially with a backup offensive line, you got to try and establish the run game in some capacity. Maybe that is a little bit heavier dose of a guy like Roshan. Maybe it is just simply just getting back to the basics, right? Like maybe run some counter, maybe run some traps, maybe run very just simple run concepts and just try to be the more physical team. But and he's got a hell of a challenge ahead where obviously we're going to talk more in detail about it, but it's Packers week. If you want to fix anything and you want people chanting your name, if you're Thomas Brown, it's to put it together a game plan to beat the Green Bay Packers in Chicago. And he's got a hell of an opportunity at hand, but I think it's the right decision. I don't know if you heard this report, Q, from Tom Pelissero, but supposedly there was rumblings of they were considering just chucking Waldron up in the booth and changing it that way. And I guess it took finally some players approaching Eberflus and being like, hey, this isn't working, for him to finally be like, you know what? You're right. Which, good on the players. I like that the players have a voice with Eberflus. If there's one thing I can like about the guy as a head coach, it's respecting the input of your players, because guess what? At the end of the day, the guys on the field have to get it done. If they realize that there's something holding them back from being successful, being vocal about it, I think is healthy. And, you saw it a little bit here. Bear Truth 9 said, chunk of the problem is roster construction, building around traits, good football character, but you need those dogs and true high caliber leaders that can produce. I think they have that. I think it's the rest of the roster that needs to come together and get to that level. I think they have the leadership group that needs to be in place. And I think you saw it executed here with the Waldron decision.
Yeah. I mean, I think, like you said, good on the players for kind of forcing their hand on that. And I think at the end of the day, if I'm being frank, Eberflus knows he's done. Eberflus knows he's a dead man walking. And if I was the players, I'd be like, I'm coming to him like, look, we all know the situation that we're looking at here. Do the best by us. At least if we're going down, at least let us go down with the guy who we think is going to do a better job for us. Now, a few things I want to touch on Thomas Brown here. Last year, offense coordinator for the Carolina Panthers. Ew, gross. Number 1 overall pick, Carolina Panthers. That offense was awful. Bryce Young was terrible. Like, a lot to dislike when you hear that, right? But I have to say, Frank Reich called the plays for most of the season, except for week 8, I believe, against the Texans. From everything I can gather, he called the plays that game, because everything I'm reading is saying the Panthers started 0-6, and then he turned the play calling, Reich turned the play calling over to Thomas Brown, and then took it back the very next game. Week 7 was a bye week, so that means week 8. To me, when I'm reading that, it says week 8 was the one game where Thomas Brown called plays before Reich was fired. After Reich was fired, he also called plays for the final 6 games. At that point, the whole staff, the whole team knows these guys are dead men walking. They're just trying to get to the end of the year. So I put a bit more weight on that week 8 game than on the final 6 games. But I have to mention this because this offseason, when I was preparing for I mentioned it, I feel like every episode, but the offseason review that I do for every team, I watched that Texans game by chance. Like I said, okay, I'll watch this one for Bryce Young. Texans had a good defense. Like D'Amico Ryans does some tough stuff. But they might have lacked a little talent last year. So I felt like that was a good game to get an assessment of where Bryce Young sat. I came away from that game feeling good about Bryce Young. And PFF agrees with me. PFF gave him a 68.6 passing grade in that game. He threw for 235 yards, 71% completion percentage, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. I mean, Thomas Brown found something that worked for Bryce Young in that game and was able to use it. And then Frank Reich took the play calling back and went kind of downhill. But when you look at Bryce Young's PFF grades for the year, he had 5 games above a 60 PFF grade. Guess how many of those games came with Thomas Brown calling plays? 4. 4 of those 5 games were Thomas Brown calling plays. So when Reich was calling plays, he had almost like 60 is what I consider average for PFF scores, right? Like 60 to 65. That feels about like that's like, okay, you should be around league average with that. He was only above average for 5 games last year. 4 of them were with Thomas Brown calling the plays. So that gives me a little comfort with the decision here. And then another thing that I want to kind of throw up here, and this was a tweet from Jason Leeser earlier today saying that new Bears offense coordinator Thomas Brown said something that stuck with me when asked earlier in the season about the notion of Caleb Williams to be overly careful. Quote, "You can't be scared to throw the football and take chances. You would never make any plays." And that brings me to, is Matt Eberflus just going to let Thomas Brown do his job? Or are we going to see more of Justin Fields made aggressive throws over the middle of the field when he was a rookie under Matt Nagy? They disappeared under Eberflus, under Getsy. We blame Getsy for it, but I'm wondering if it was Eberflus, if it was 200 club, if it was end every drive with a kick, if it was the conservative nature of defensive head coach. Because when we saw Tyson Bagent come out there last year, he was ripping it at first. By the time he was done, he looked like he was playing scared out there. And I feel like that's what we've seen with Caleb Williams too, of started the season ripping it, you know? And then especially after the bye, it looks like he's being overly careful about everything. I want Matt Eberflus to just get the hell out of the way of the offense. This kid needs to develop. This kid needs to play, and he can't play scared out there. And I feel like they are forcing him into playing scared for repercussions or whatever it might be of turnovers. He needs to throw picks. Yeah. I don't want him to throw picks. He needs to learn what NFL Open is. He needs to learn what windows he can and can't try, and what is doable in this league. How you learn from your mistakes. Like Caleb is the kid. Like the first what was it, 5 weeks before the bye or 4? He didn't make the same mistake twice. It felt like he was learning everything so fast, and then after the bye, it was like he just got neutered. It was a different player out there, and if Matt Eberflus is forcing that same effect on Thomas Brown, nothing's going to change. Like, then Shane Waldron was just a fall guy, and we're going to keep watching the same thing for the rest of the year.
Yeah, and I think, too, you heard some of the reports that kind of quantified with this as well, that supposedly players were hoping that Bagent would start. What do you think is going to happen to Tyson Bagent? It's going to be the same fucking nonsense. It's going to be rip it the first game, and then everything's going to be dialed back. It was the same way last year when he took over for Fields, when Fields got hurt for 4 games. The first game against Minnesota, he came in there and he was throwing the ball downfield, and he was trying to push it, and granted, underthrowing heavily, because I don't think Tyson Bagent has the same level arm as a Caleb Williams or even a Justin Fields. And then you saw it in those games against like Carolina and all that, and the Raiders, where everything was super simple. They leaned heavy on the run game. Like, it wasn't, I know everybody's calling, give Tyson Bagent a try. Nothing's going to be different. If anything, there's going to be bigger handcuffs on the offense because there's a less talent there. If Caleb's hurt, different animal. Yes, start Tyson Bagent. But Caleb's not hurt. And like you said, this guy needs to learn. He needs to learn. And you can't take away that confidence from him. Otherwise, if you're Matt Eberflus and you take away that confidence from him, you are even further a dead man walking because you can't get out of your own way. So I'm hoping that it means that they're going to let him rip a little bit more, because like you said, you saw it before the bye. I still think about that throw to Keenan Allen in the London game. It still gives me goosebumps because of the window he fit that ball into, over the middle, into a tight back shoulder window to Keenan Allen. We haven't seen that kind of throw even come from him. And in fairness, I don't know, you've watched some of the tape. I've watched some of the tape. It's hard to throw the football when guys aren't open either. So really hoping that Brown's able to take care of some stuff. Bear Truth 9 says tomorrow it's Flus, Brown, and Caleb Williams at the pressers. So there might be some incredible quotes in tomorrow's news cycle. And by tomorrow, we mean Wednesday, of course, if you're listening to this in podcast form. So it's going to be a good one. But man, I agree with you. If they if they handcuff Brown with what he's able to do with the offense, it's going to be the same song and dance. I really hope they just let Brown, especially if they all kind of know that like your job's on the line and it might not matter in the grand scheme, at least go out swinging.
If there's one thing that kind of gives me a little hope there, it is that I think Eberflus is a guy who wants to do right by his assistants. I don't think he felt like he did right by Waldron at all, especially based on the way that it was presented of like, and like we respectfully like let him, however they worded it was kind of weird. And it felt like, okay, they feel bad about this, which maybe they should. But if Eberflus, that makes me think one, Eberflus might get out of the way because Thomas Brown might be like, if this doesn't work for him, he's not going to get another chance for a while. He was the offensive coordinator for the worst team in the NFL last year. If he's the offensive coordinator who couldn't make back-to-back number one picks work, I don't think he's going to get a play calling shot for a long time again. So I hope Eberflus gives him that chance. And if he doesn't, I hope Thomas Brown says, fuck you, and does what he wants. Because like, that's where the Bears are sitting right now. Like the Bears need someone to just do that right now. And Thomas Brown's career needs him to just do that if Eberflus gets in the way. That's the way that I read it, at least.
Yeah. I think too, those two are going to over communicate now down the stretch, right? Because Brown is just less experienced by nature as an OC in comparison to what Shane Waldron was prior to his dismissal. I hope Brown's telling that to Flus. Like, hey man, look, like this is my chance for my career. Like, let's be real. Shane Waldron's going to get another job somewhere, probably as a QB coach to start. And just like Matt Nagy, right? Got a quarterback coach job. He went tail between his legs back to Andy Reid. They promote him to OC. You know, he's back in an offense coordinator role. If I'm Brown, I'm looking at Flus and going, dude, you have to let me just do what I need to do. And sure, of course, Flus is going to have opinions and input on the game plans every week. That's fine. That's normal. That's what a head coach is supposed to do. But when it's all said and done, you just hope that Flus goes, hey, man, you're right. I'm going to let you do what you feel is right. And we're just going to, you know, I'm sure they're all, like you said, thinking the same thing. If we're going to go down together, at least let's go down swinging. And I agree. I hope that's the case. I hope we see that, especially against the Packers. Like, you know how cool it would be for the Bears to come out and just like put up like 35 points on the Packers defense and win like 35-21 or something.
Thomas Brown hung 30 on him last year.
If anybody's got a good game plan on how to beat the Packers, it might be Thomas Brown.
It was a different D coordinator for the Packers, granted, but like very different D coordinator because the guy they've got now is doing some stuff. But with all that being said, let's get into this game preview a little. And if you haven't, this past offseason, we went through every team in the NFC North to get pre-season previews for the divisional opponents to get to know our divisional opponents really well. We had a great episode with Paul Noonan from Acme Packing Company where he gave us all the goods on all the inside details in the Packers that us Bears fans might not know, gave us some clear weaknesses to attack, and make sure to go check that episode out. Just scroll back to I think it was August. Scroll back some of the episodes in August. You'll find the Packers one. It was a really great conversation I had with him about the Packers depth chart, their philosophies. It was just really well done. But getting to our weather report. I'm sorry, really well done by Paul Noonan. Not by me. It was fine by me. But Paul was the star. But to our weather report. It's a home game in Chicago. High of 59 degrees. I think there's a 40% chance of rain. Going to be windy, though. Wind gusts of up to 24 miles an hour. So another home game. It feels like every one of these home games for Caleb has just been covered by wind. This past, I mean, you were there, Ron. On the all 20, I couldn't notice it that much in the broadcast view. But on the all 22, I was like, oh shit, this stuff is flying. This trash is flying all over the field, and that wind is not. That is a factor out here today. Somebody
I was with on Sunday made the joke that we saw more trash on the field in favor of the Bears than flags, because that's just how bad everything was blowing around. Honestly, if people are curious of what should it feel like on Sunday at Soldier Field, this past Sunday, but maybe a little less sun and a little cooler. Otherwise, it's going to be almost exactly identical to what it was for that Patriots game.
Yeah. So it's going to be a factor out there again. Hopefully the Bears, we don't have injury reports yet. Hopefully get some linemen back because that was a rough one. But
at least get Darnell right back. Like,
yeah. Well,
that one is where they really, in my opinion, was the biggest shit show was that right side of the offensive line. Because you can tell when there's not somebody bigger and stronger helping Coleman Shelton.
I was chatting with some friends today, and I was like, Darnell Wright and Tevin Jenkins are your elevators out there, right? They're the guys who can cover for the others when there's a mistake, and when you're missing both of them, it's really hard to make up for it because you don't have anyone who can cover for someone else out there consistently.
Well put.
But with that being said, let's get a little bit into the Packers roster here.
The baddest man.
Ron, when you look at this Packers roster, for those of you listening on the podcast forum, on the YouTube, we have a graphic up here with the Packers starters on each side of the football. Ron, who are you worried about? I'll let you choose side of the ball. Who is your baddest man on either side? Like, we're going to do an offensive one and a defensive one, but you choose your first guy.
I'll start on the defensive side of the football because I think the guy to me right now, like don't get me wrong, there's a lot of really good players on their defense. Let's be brutally honest with each other. I think Bullard is a really good safety. Obviously, Jair Alexander has a long track record of being a very good cornerback. Rashawn Gary's a monster, as is Kenny Clark. Like those two are the guys on that defensive line that certainly scare me the most. Quay Walker's a really good player. Your graphic puts it perfectly, Q. He was the guy that when they signed him this offseason, I dropped a lot of F-bombs when I saw that because I was like, yeah, here we go again. It's just another weapon. They don't need more weapons. They have enough weapons on defense as it is. Xavier McKinney's a dude, and he's having a really good season for them, especially if the Bears are going to try to push the ball downfield, especially if we're concerned about the wind being a factor where it could alter throws. That's a guy playing that deep center field that's going to scare the living shit out of me. If I'm a Bears fan, if I'm Thomas Brown, if I'm Caleb Williams, he's a bad dude. He was a bad dude with the Giants. There's a reason he got paid the way he did by the Green Bay Packers. Xavier McKinney's my baddest man for that Green Bay defense.
I think that's the right choice here. And I mean, when I'm looking at this, you've got, like you mentioned, Jair Alexander, Rashawn Gary. I think Kenny Clark belongs in the conversation still, even though, according to PFF, he's having a down year. I haven't watched a lot of Packers tape, but I assume it's probably a usage thing more than anything because he's just been so good for so long. Xavier McKinney is the clear choice here. He's got like 6 interceptions on the year. He's been a game changer for them from a turnover standpoint. They feel like they're fit. When I look at their advanced stats here, like 11th in yards allowed, 12th in points allowed, 9th in EPA per play among defenses, but 28th in success rate. So to me, that reads as they've been kind of a bend, don't break defense that relies on turnovers. And they've gotten a lot of turnovers. They're near the top of the league in them.
You mean what the Bears are supposed to be on defense, Cam?
Yeah, but so much better. I mean, I don't mean to mince words, but like they attack. These guys attack and keep a bend, don't break mentality. I feel like the Bears don't attack enough at times or attack too much. Like they don't understand the balance of it that well. And I mean, I'm sure they do, but right now it just feels like they don't. But I think their mentality is just a lot more man coverage than what the Bears do, but they play that man coverage with more the mindset of bend, don't break. We're focusing on turnovers here. McKinney's been the big part of that. But for my baddest man on defense, I got to go with the guy I hate. Because I hate this guy. I can't stand him. He drives me freaking insane. He's got 3 interceptions against the Bears in his career, plus a forced fumble in let's see how many games is that? In 10 games played. I mean, he's just, ugh. It's like every time I used to do these game previews where I'd like pull out the all 22 and I'd make like a 10-minute video of cut ups and where I think the Bears can attack him. And I'm just like, they can attack Jair Alexander. He's not that good. He makes these mistakes here, and here. And then he gets an interception and makes me look stupid. And he does something and it's just like, I can't stand this guy. It's Jair Alexander because he just keeps showing up keeps making me wrong and keeps just like rubbing it in my face as a fan, rubbing it in the Bears' face, rubbing it in everyone in the stadium's face, what he's doing to the Bears. Like, it's just, I hate that guy. He has to be the baddest man for me. So I'm so glad you went with McKinney so I could go on this rant about how much I hate Jair Alexander.
Hey, I mean, there's a reason he got paid what he got paid, right? I mean, not every player is necessarily perfect, but the real playmakers are the guys that show up and show out on the score sheet, and that's kind of what Alexander is. He's not a perfect corner by any means, but when you need a big play out of him, he comes up and he makes it.
Yeah. Now, how about on offense, Ron? Where are you going for your baddest man on offense here?
Oh, selfishly, I want to say the guy that's on my fantasy team that, like, I want to have an okay week this week, but not too good of a week to where the Packers win. And that guy being Jaden Reed, but I feel like he's been a very hot and cold kind of player. Honestly, just the way this offense has performed this year, especially with, I don't want to call it inconsistencies at quarterback because I don't think that's the right term. Inconsistency of availability might be the better term that I'm looking for here, just with Jordan Love's injuries that he's been dealing with. He hasn't quite been the same quarterback, obviously, when Malik Willis in the game. Josh Jacobs has been that dude this year. I mean, he has looked just as every bit of good or better than Aaron Jones has in that offense. Now, don't get me wrong. Aaron Jones has had a very, very, very good season thus far, right, for the Minnesota Vikings. And he had a lot of really good years with the Packers as well. But you have to enjoy what Josh Jacobs is doing on paper. And I say on paper because I don't look at the logo that's on the side of his helmet. But if I am a fantasy football player, if I'm somebody who's, looking for guys that are going to put up numbers that I can, place wagers on, perhaps if you live in a state where that's legal, Josh Jacobs is a bad dude at running back. And he kind of almost makes this offense feel better than it was just a season ago, which is really scary to think.
Yeah, Jacobs is a good choice here. Like, I think that he got a little overpaid, if I'm being honest, but he's performed well enough there and been doing good work, and he's a guy who can be a true bell cow for your offense. I want to go with Jaden Reed here. Jaden Reed, 620 yards, 3 touchdowns on the year. Like, I feel like he is the guy that makes this wide receiver core all work. It all kind of revolves around what he does. But for Bears reasons, I'm going with Tucker Kraft because I feel like Matt LaFleur always gears up like a 50-yard touchdown for their tight end against the Bears. Every single time. It's just you have a tight end running wide open down the seam or like just no one around him for 15 yards. And it's like, how the hell did he do that? Like, why can't the Bears get an offensive coordinator who can do that? But like,
because we can't have nice things, Q.
Tucker Kraft has been awesome for the Packers this year. 376 yards, 5 touchdowns. Like, he out of North Dakota State, he's a guy who's really broken out this year. And like, he's a guy who I think you're going to have to pay a lot of attention to, especially if they get your guy Josh Jacobs going. Tucker Kraft is going to be in play on the play action game big time.
And you know what's funny about Tucker Kraft? Tucker Kraft was a guy that I knew a lot about in the draft process because of my best friend's wife's dad. So they live in South Dakota, and they knew Tucker Kraft when he was younger. And they're like, yeah, he's a stud. Like, I wonder where he's going to go. And of course, Musgrave gets taken by the Packers, and then Kraft gets taken. And I remember her dad being like, no, Kraft's the better player of the two of them, man. He goes, I've seen him in person. He's just different. And I took that insider information and I used it. And for fantasy football, it's worked out real well so far. Real well. Yeah. Tucker Kraft looks really good on my dynasty team right now. But he's a dude. He is a badass. Like, he can block well. You know what he is? He's just a good old-fashioned Midwestern tight end, and you see it every Sunday for the Packers because he makes big plays, and then he just does what you expect out of a tight end in terms of the little things that go largely unnoticed by the casual fan or just in the event of a normal play, whether that's a block, a chip, occupying a defender. He does it all really well. Really good player, and of course, that just inevitably makes him a pain in the ass for us on Sunday, like you said.
Yeah. Now that we've gotten all the nice words out of the way, let's get to where we really want to be. Talking bad about this team.
The nicest man.
Ron, where are you going for your nicest man?
I needed that dopamine shot of the puppy after this week. It's hard. It's really hard to look at this defense and truly find a weakness. But I feel like if you're going to target anybody, it's got to be Stokes, right? Like Stokes is the guy, especially when you look at how the Bears offense is schematically structured right now. To me, Rome Odunze is probably going to be covered by Jair Alexander more often than not. This is the opportunity where a Keenan Allen, a DJ Moore, those guys need to take advantage of a guy like Eric Stokes on the other side of the ball, and just even a couple of big plays, right? I mean, he can have 96% of his snaps be good, and that's okay. But if he's got those 3 or 4 bad snaps where TJ Moore's open for a 35-yard touchdown, Keenan Allen makes a big play in the passing game to set something else up. That's what they really need to take advantage of. It's really hard to find a weakness on this Packers defense, truly. Like, they were a really good unit. But to me, that's the one place that I immediately look and I go, I hope he's the nicest man this week, because I hope he's willing to take the Bears wide receivers to the, just like you would take your buddy to the airport. He takes them to the end zone is what I'm hoping for. And to me, that's the way to attack this Packers defense. I know there's other areas that you can certainly attack them, but to me, thinking about what the Bears have, if I'm Thomas Brown, I'm saying, how do we create mismatches against cornerback number 2 in this Green Bay secondary?
And that's like I plugged earlier our offseason episode. That's what Paul Noonan said. He said, if you get Eric Stokes in man coverage, you attack, you attack, you attack. Because, I mean, you pull up his PFF grades in man coverage, 30.3, 16 targets, 141 yards, 14.1 yards per catch. Like, he hasn't been attacked as much as, like, only 16 targets isn't that much, but like the next closest is 12. There's only, 12 plus 9, that's 21, 37, 16 out of 38 man coverage targets have gone his way. So over half the time, or not over, nearly half the time,
Close
Packers
to,
are in man coverage. Eric Stokes is getting targeted when the ball gets thrown. That tells you a lot. Like, that's the guy that you want to go after in man coverage. And that would have been my main choice here. My real choice here is Quay Walker. I think you can confuse Quay Walker in the play action game and misdirection. I think you can get guys open behind him. I think his awareness is a little bit lacking there, and I think he's a guy who isn't the best at sorting out run lanes. So he's a very physically talented football player. Like, he can do a lot of things physically and make some really nice looking plays for you, but I question his ability to fully process the game as it's happening. So I think he's a guy that you can go after. My answer for the brand, though, is Jair Alexander. He can be beat. I swear. He has given up a 70-yard bomb this year in man coverage. He makes mistakes. He's a gambler. He's Kenny Rogers out here riverboat gambling to get interceptions. And you know what? You can take advantage of that if you just put the plan together right, when they're not in split field safeties, when Xavier McKinney isn't over the top of him, and you get a double move, he's going to jump on that double move. You just have to set it up right. So he's baddest and nicest man for this defense, because he sucks and I hate him, and he's made me eat my words over and over, but I haven't changed my opinion either.
Hey, just remember the biggest play that N'Keal Harry had in the Chicago Bears uniform came in on a go route one-on-one against Jair Alexander. So let's not forget.
Yeah, he can be taken advantage of. Just don't mess with him too much. But when the opportunity's there, mess with them. How about an offense, Ron? Where are you going for nicest man?
I look at your graphic, Q, and I tend to agree. I selfishly, I want to take a cheap shot, so I'm going to take a cheap shot, and I'll leave the logic to you here, just as you took a shot at Jair Alexander on the other side of the ball. Christian Watson is a fast, big traffic cone. That's what he is. I got 3 traffic cones in my garage right now that closely resemble Christian Watson on a football field. And I'll tell you what, to me, if you're going to get beat, and by you, I mean the Bears defense in the pass game, it's going to come either via Romeo Doubs, it's going to come via Jaden Reed, or it's going to come via Tucker Kraft. Christian Watson is the reason that the Packers don't draft high receivers, because look at the amount of them that have actually worked out. Javon Walker, way back when you and I were like still eating Gushers for lunch and playing recess, And then Jordy Nelson was a second-round pick. That's probably the highest drafted receiver that's actually worked out well for the Packers in that time frame. I think Devontae was also a second-round pick. So excuse me, I'll give props to Devontae now that he's no longer a Packer. I'll give it where it's due. To me, Jaden Reed and Romeo Dobbs are probably the better receivers. And Tucker Kraft, we've already highlighted what he can do in the passing game. So I'm going to take a shot because I think Christian Watson was severely overhyped in his draft class. And I'm just happy that Green Bay was the ones that took the shot on him and for him to really not work out a whole ton so far. And I hope that continues because if he has a good game on Sunday, Q, I might be really down in the dumps when it's all said and done.
I mean, he's a one-trick pony, right? He's deep shot guy or nothing, it feels like a lot of time. Or like quick hitter where he can just burn. But it doesn't feel like there's a lot of in between there. So I'm with you on that. I'm going with I want to go with Josh Myers, but I haven't watched enough of his tape to not trust his PFF grade here. And his PFF grade say he's been a pretty darn good pass blocker this year, which, I still can't believe the Packers took him over Creed Humphrey, but that's another discussion. Maybe that's part of in my mind of like, hey, he's never going to live up to Creed Humphrey. So but Jordan Morgan, rookie out of Arizona, right guard. I don't know. I liked Jordan Morgan enough, but he had short arms. He played offensive tackle in college. He had short arm, like sub 33-inch long arms. So it was like, okay, he's going to have to kick inside. But to me, the thing with him always was I saw him as a finesse tackle who won with speed and precision. And I'm just not sure that plays inside that well. And he's been fine this year for a rookie, like 59.2 PFF grade. He just got his first game where he's actually seems like going end to end in the game, 65 snaps, gave up 4 pressures and 42 pass block snaps. So he got had a few times. I think 2 QB hits on that. Yeah, 2 QB hits. I think he's a guy who you can beat with power. I think he's a guy who doesn't want to be in a phone booth with Javon Dexter. And I just don't, his demeanor never screamed offensive guard to me. And that was my hesitation with him as a prospect. If he had longer arms, I thought he would have been an awesome offensive tackle prospect, but he didn't. And he kind of ends up in no man's land there because I just don't think he has the aggressiveness to play inside against some of the big boys up front. So Jordan Morgan is the guy that I'm attacking on this offensive unit for the Packers.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Just to keep it short here, like you said, he was a guy to me that always felt like a fringe tackle. And I think could be very successful at tackle, but I think he was probably better suited for the right side more so than the left. And of course, you already have Zach Tom there, who has turned out to be a really good player. I think a guy that you and I, Q, both really liked was Zach Tom in the draft process a couple of years ago.
Although I knocked him a little bit coming into this year, watching the playoff games last year. He might have been dealing with an injury. I haven't gotten a lot of clarity on that, but some Packers fans came at me this offseason for saying I think he got a little overrated at this point. I thought his ceiling was like good offensive tackle, not like all pro, constant Pro Bowl offensive tackle. And he's playing up to that potential all pro level right now. So I might have egg on my face on that one.
Yeah, and it feels like maybe I think before the season you would have argued for those two to be flip-flopped, where like Tom might be the better interior guy at guard, and then Morgan would be the better outside guy at tackle. But I think Tom also lacks what you mentioned. You need to be a feisty son of a bitch to play guard in the NFL. Like guard is the only position where you will ever have free shots at guys. You don't get that at tackle. You don't get that at center. But son of a bitch, if you get a free tee shot as a guard, there's nothing better in football than getting to just ram a guy in the ribs. Morgan doesn't do that, like you said. So I think that's certainly an area where the Bears can take advantage. I really hope this is like a Javon Dexter, I don't want to say coming out party because we already know how good he can be. And I think he's going to continue to get better. But this would be one of those really cool, like, oh, hey, you look at the box score at the end of the game and you see what Javon Dexter tangibly did with the numbers on a play-to-play basis because he has a couple tackles for loss and maybe even a couple sacks.
Yeah, I definitely think that's an option here. But now that we've talked through this roster some, let's get to our next part here.
Keys to victory.
Ron, I think first and foremost, the biggest key to victory in this game is just Thomas Brown making something work.
Fair. I think you're 100% right. I think it's some kind of game plan that can set you up for success. And Q, I might even argue that this is maybe my key to victory here to contribute to our 3.
Mm-hmm.
Dedicate yourself to the run game. To me, if the Bears are going to make things happen, again, I agree with you. We'll know more about injury reports come Wednesday. If you can get Darnell Wright back, maybe even if you get a Kieran Amagashi back this week, as crazy as that feels to say, given the rawness of his game, I would love to see them dedicate themselves to the run game. You see the opportunities inside against this defensive Packers in terms of grades. I think if you're going to beat them, that's where you got to go. And I would love to see a DeAndre Swift have a big game. Maybe Roshan have a couple of really big plays in short yardage. Because once you start to do that, you mentioned what Quay Walker lacks as a linebacker in the NFL. If you're able to dedicate yourself to the run game and it's successful, that's going to open up endless worlds for Caleb in terms of play action. I think that's something the Bears didn't do enough of under Shane Waldron was play action. And I think you and I have talked more than once about that being a key to victory was dedicate yourself to the play action game. Try to open things up for your quarterback in play action. Right? I mean, everybody laughs about Kirk Cousins, but Kirk Cousins is one of the best quarterbacks in football when it comes to play action because of what it allows him to do and what it sets up conceptually down the field. To me, dedicate yourself to the running game because that is just going to make Caleb's life easier. I think it's going to make Thomas Brown's life easier. You have 2 really good backs. And if you get one starter back this week and can kind of figure it out with the rest of the group, that could go a long way to this Bears offense having success. I feel like it kind of always has felt this season that if DeAndre Swift has a big game, the Bears offense has a big game. And to me, for that reason, they have to dedicate themselves to the run game more than they did on Sunday.
Yeah, I think that's a good key. So we'll go with Thomas Brown making something work. I think making the offense his own is another way to put a spin on that. And then 2,
Indeed.
leaning into that run game, actually deciding that we are doing this week, hell or high water, we're going to run the football. And then number 3, I think for me is you got to confuse Jordan Love. He can be confused. We've seen it. Like we've seen it against the Bears. We've seen it against not the Bears. Like even though it didn't end in picks last year in either of the matchups with the Packers, he made some bad throws that were like, okay, you got him to do what you wanted him to do. You just didn't execute on the last part of it. You need to capitalize on that. You need to confuse them and capitalize on the opportunities when they're there.
And I think too, I think too, with Love, you've seen a little bit more of it this season, right? He'll have a big game, but he'll turn the ball over a lot, right? I mean, I have him in a couple of fantasy leagues myself. So I've seen it happen this year where he might have 2 or 3 touchdowns, but he's also got 1 or 2 or even 3 picks as a piece of that. To me, if the Bears defense is going to have success against Jordan Love, you have to get him to turn over the football. You have film on how to do it now, right? Last season, it felt like he had such this miracle season. Yes, he had some down games, but overall, he was really composed. He never really turned the ball over much. This year, it really feels like, okay, now you actually have the body of work that resulted in what you want from a defense against Jordan Love in terms of multiple interceptions in a game, limiting him to, a certain amount of yards. Utilize some of those concepts. You're Matt Eberflus. Eberflus, you want to turn your season around? Beat the Packers, brother. We've seen it before. Lovey's beloved in this city because he was the one coach in the 21st century that could beat the fucking Packers. You beat the Packers on Sunday, good things happen, and I agree with you. In order to do it, Jordan Love needs to look at least somewhat human because if he plays to his potential, we know how that goes. And typically, if he does play to said potential, it does not result in the Bears getting a 1 in the win column on Sunday.
Ron, what's your prediction for this game?
You know what, Q? I've sat on here and I predicted a lot of wins that didn't happen this season. So maybe, just maybe, I'm going to look like the asshole and hopefully I'm wrong. I think the Packers win this game. I think, I think there could be an advantage at hand. I do with Thomas Brown and maybe, there's nothing really on tape with this offense that Matt LaFleur and his coaching staff can lean on to develop a game plan. but it's the Packers. And until they're not the Packers against the Bears, I can't comfortably sit here and say that the Bears are going to win this game. I think it has a world of being close, and I hope it is. As Sonny said a little bit earlier in the show, just look competent. If they lose, they lose. But at least make it look like Caleb and the wide receivers are on the same page. That's what I want to see Sunday. And to me, if they are able to do that, even if they lose, it's still going to be a close game. If the wind is going to play a factor as well, I don't think we're going to see a ton of field goals, but there's going to be one that I think decides the game. I'm going to say the Packers win this one, but only by 3. I have 24-21 as my final score for Green Bay.
I'm with you. I'm on the same page there. I mean, I think I just have a hard time picking the Bears in this game because it's been such a rough 3 weeks. It's been, in the preseason, I probably would have told you I think the Bears can win this one. Before the bye, I probably would have told you I think the Bears can win this one. On paper, I still think the Bears have the talent to win this one, but the Packers have burned me too many times. The last 3 weeks have each burned me. I don't know how I can actually pick the Bears here. My model has this drawn up as a 23-17 game with the Packers winning. I'm going to kick that up just a touch. I'm going 27-17 Packers. I think they're going to cover the 7 points or 6.5. I think it was. So maybe it ends up being 24-17 or something. But I have a hard. I don't know. I think it ends in a way that is not the Bears driving to win. So that's why I say 10 points. I think it's going to end with the Bears driving to try to get within a score. Just based off I think it's a tall task to ask Thomas Brown to come in and win this game on offense. I think you'll see some stuff get fixed, some stuff maybe trending the right direction. But I think it's a multi-week effort to try and turn this thing around right now, and I just don't think they're there yet.
Fair. I'll tell you what, Q. I hope we're all wrong at the end of the day. But I agree with you. It's a tall task for Thomas Brown to come in and magically fix this offense this week. I hope over the course of the rest of the season, we see that tangible improvement because of Thomas Brown taking over. But for the time being, this is a hell of a tall task to come into with, 9 games already under your belt and 10 weeks of football. And you're taking over now for the final 7. It's a tough task. And I hope he proves us wrong, Q. But
if
until
they
then,
win though, bold prediction, Kevin Byard interception.
Yeah, I think so. Anybody interception. Fuck, it feels like the Bears defense has not taken the football away in God knows how long.
I mean, didn't they got at least one this past week, didn't they? TJ Edwards?
Yeah, TJ had a nice pick. But if we're being totally fair, Q, I was behind the Patriots offense from my seat. Mm-hmm. I saw the pick coming before the pick happened because Drake May threw it right to him.
Yeah, right. He does. We talked about that in the pregame too. Drake May just he sprays them sometimes, just randomly. But
he sprayed that one.
Anyways, Ron, why don't we get out of here? The only way we know how.
Hey, bear down, baby. We'll see you on the O-Line show, everybody.
Bear down.